When I read about this topic about diversities and similarities, I started to think about these two Chinese girls I saw in Bombay about 2 or 3 years ago. And to me, they looked exactly the same. And as if to accentuate my point and to even confirm my point, they were wearing similar t-shirts with the quotation saying same, same, but different. And I laughed about it because I thought it's some kind of a joke. But now when I look back at it at hindsight, I realized there probably was some deep philosophy in it. And coming from Asia, it was probably philosophy. So we are so similar genetically. If you look at our genetic coding, we are said to be 99% similar to chimpanzees. Some people, you might argue, are not necessarily genetically similar. And the fun fact is that we are even 50% similar to a banana genetically. And again, you might argue that some people are 100% bananas, but that's a different thing. So when you think about all the similarities that we have with each other, what is it that makes us different? And I would say the only thing that makes us different is our cultural background. What we have been told, what we have been taught, what we think, or what our society told us is right and wrong. So what you think is right may be something that I was told that it's wrong, and the other way around. And I would say we are even culturally programmed. We are programmed to think in a certain manner. Our lifestyle, our clothing, everything depends on what we have been told since our childhood. Now let us take an example of having breakfast. I eat a lot of food. It doesn't show, but yeah, I do. And when I start my morning, I eat a big meal. That's how I start my mornings. That's how we've been doing in India. You start with a lot of food right in the morning and big lunch and big dinner too. So there's no food pyramid, it's a block. So when I came to the Netherlands, a lot of people were shocked, how can you eat so much? And I thought, how can you not? Because you've been sleeping for 10 hours or 9, 8, 7, whatever, and you've been starving. Sometimes I even get up with wanting to eat something, and not because I had enough sleep. So it's because you probably didn't choose this breakfast. If you come to the Netherlands, a lot of people would just have bread and jam and maybe cheese. But that's because when you were probably you started to eat your breakfast since you were 3, maybe 4 or 5. But it's your parents who put that food in front of you. So every day they give you bread and jam and cheese, and that's what you thought is breakfast. But my parents give me something else. So imagine if they had given you steak early morning every day. You probably would have had steak every day as breakfast. Maybe that would have become your breakfast, and you would have found it weird that other people don't eat steak in the morning. So you have been programmed to think in a certain manner. Our choices and even the decisions we take in life come from that cultural programming, because people from a certain region always think in a certain manner, and you might agree with the people in your region more than from another region. That's because we are all been told by our societies. So I would say that all the values that we have today are not your individual values. They are values that we have borrowed from our parents, from our society. We have been told again and again, and we think those are my values, but no, they are somebody else's values. So we have to start to think individually and try to bridge those gaps, because there are a lot of gaps and a lot of things that we might even laugh at somebody's culture. It's a good thing to laugh though, because the moment you start ridiculing all those ridiculous things in our own cultures, a lot of things that you might find strange in your own culture, those things are to be laughed at, and we try to change those things. Because if you look back at your own culture, maybe 50 years ago, it was something different. Those values changed today. And maybe 100 years ago, they were probably completely opposite of what you thought your culture was. So who changes this? We do. We are the society. You cannot wait for your uncle to change it. It's time for you to change it. It's time for you to be open and logical and change these things. So I would like to talk about the cliches and the prejudices that we have about each other. Some are good, some are bad. And let's say I grew up learning martial arts, so I saw a lot of Chinese movies. And I was always watching these kung fu movies where they fight for 30 minutes. And my friends would be slumping next to me because they were like, okay, what's happening? These people are just going on and on and on. Nobody fights so much. But yeah, they do in Chinese movies. And I liked it because I like to see how they kick, how they punch, how they jump. And I could even rewind and watch again. But then that's what I thought China was about. you see an old lady, maybe 90 years old, taking a double flag back flip and kicking, and you see the beggars in China. They're always fighting, and they're fighting with some crane style, monkey style, and you start to wonder, why are you a beggar? So when the first time I met a Chinese person that was in the Netherlands, and the first question I asked him, because I was very eager, was what form of Kung Fu do you practice? And he was like, I don't. And I was like, no, your father didn't teach you? He was like, my father doesn't either. I'm like, how is that possible? I said. I was really surprised. And he said, no, I don't know Kung Fu. I don't know anybody who knows Kung Fu. And I was wondering if he's really from China. And it was so terrible for me. I felt terrible for days that this Chinese guy doesn't know Kung Fu. Because that was my picture of China. That is how we are prejudiced about each other. And this is a good prejudice though, but there are some bad ones which we don't want to talk about, but we should be able to. The moment we open up, the moment we laugh at those things, I think it's then easier for us to bridge those gaps. So let me just tell you one more incident which I have myself experienced. I draft for legal contracts for a company here. So I went visiting them, and I was introduced to everybody around there. And I was taken to the IT department, where the IT guy was a white Dutch guy. His assistant was white, maybe not Dutch, but he was not Indian. And I was just standing there because I was introduced, and I was waiting there to collect my laptop because they would program it or something. And he was there standing around with all his gadgets blinking around him. I was just waiting for him to put down the passwords and all that. And suddenly a Dutch guy walks in, and I could see that he's new because he was still wearing a badge. Maybe the reception tells them wear it all the time. And yeah, you know a new person when he comes in. He walks inside, and then he looks at this one white guy, and he dismisses him, looks at the other guy. Although they are all surrounded by computers, he again dismisses the other one, and he looks at me and walks up to me and say, hey, can I have my computer? And I was like, okay. I laughed at him. I told him, well, I may look like the IT guy, but I am not the IT guy. And you could have seen the confusion on his face. He was like, but you're from India. I could hear him think. So, you know, we always think that we know about certain cultures and people. And those cliches, I would call them, are getting diluted day by day because of the age of internet. And now it's time to look at people, not classifying them, but to just bridge our gaps by talking to them, opening up, and taking the step forward to change your own cultures. Thank you.